Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Had Intuitive Aptitude Quirk. Izuku always wanted to be special, to have a quirk. And one day he got his wish. Izuku found out he could take quirks. Something Izuku didn't want. Unfortunately, this quirk came with a price. He needed more to have more. So, he became a hunter. A predator. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. After watching this video, don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Have no fear! All Might stated with a booming and righteous voice. His smile was big and bright that would make his enemies fear him, and give his allies and citizens hope. For I am here! An hour later, Musutafa's city police headquarters. In a small cell, deep in police headquarters. The vigilante/villain known as the Stalker was cuffed and heavily chained. Sitting on a metal chair next to a toilet and small bed. That wasn't all. 2 cameras were also watching his every move too. Also with a heavily armored and armed guard, who looked somewhat nervous. The police usually don't do this unless the perp or offender was a serious villain. Which the Stalker was apparently. It had been an hour since the incident happened, where Stalker lost control and had a fight with 3 pro heroes, easily beating them and having them at his mercy. An hour since he endangered countless civilians. An hour since he saved the lives of those he endangered. An hour since he was saved and apprehended by All Might, his hero. By now word would have gotten to the media on what happened, and probably who he was. Stuff like that wouldn't be difficult for the media to find out. The police probably knew everything about him by now. They might be calling his mom and telling her what happened. What he did. Stalker sighed, making the guard tense. His life was over. His dreams and goals were gone with the wind. Everyone in Japan probably knew who was and what he was. A villain, a monster. Still though, deep down he was kind of happy. No one got hurt, well, not killed anyways by his crazed hunger. He saved a few people too. He even got to meet his hero All Might. Even though he was the one who cuffed him and brought him to the police. But he was still a little down, more scared than anything. Not about him, well maybe a little. No, he was afraid for his mom. What was she going to do when she found out what happened? What he is? Stalker couldn't imagine. He didn't want to. As Stalker continued to think about his mom and his fate, a door could be heard opening, then shutting. He then heard 2 sets of footsteps walking. Finally 2 people appeared from around the corner outside his cell. One was the police officer who All Might handed over to. He had a kind yet serious face. He was a tall man with short black hair and black eyes. As a member of the police force, he was wearing his uniform. He wore a signature tan overcoat and a matching hat. The other person was a sickly and very skinny man with angular features and long limbs. He had spiky, disheveled hair with 2 bangs framing the sides of his face. He had a very long neck and his eyebrows were absent. He wore some baggy clothes. This man looked familiar to Stalker but he couldn't figure out why. Both men stopped in front of Stalker's cell. The officer holding onto a clipboard and the other just standing there, looking at Stalker strangely. Izuku Midoriya aka the Stalker, middle schooler for Oritara Junior High School. Age 14, mother's name is Inko Midoriya and father's name is Hisashi Midoriya. No criminal record to speak of. Well, used to anyway. And yet I only see one thing wrong on this board. You know what that is? Stalker, now known to be Izuku Midoriya, just sat there. With a look of shame, he remained quiet, making the officer sigh. It says here you're quirkless. And yet you not only showed you have a quirk, but you have 7. The officer stated, eyeing Izuku suspiciously. The other did the same. Izuku remained quiet. His eyes stared at the men with indifference. Tell us, how did that happen? And why you're hunting people with quirks? How many do you have that you haven't shown? Izuku just remained quiet. That is until he looked up at the men. Is everyone alright? Both men were surprised by what Izuku said. They looked over at each other. The sickly-looking man gave a nod to officer who nodded back. Mount Lady and Eraserhead were hurt, but not too badly. A few civilians got a couple scrapes and bruises. The only who was seriously hurt was Kamui Woods. He suffered a broken leg and dislocated shoulder. Izuku's eyes widened in shock, then in horror, as he lowered his head, which confused both men and the guard. But what happened next changed their confusion into shock. Izuku began to cry. Tears began to slowly fall towards the floor and down his face. His expression was filled with guilt and shame. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Izuku softly sobbed out as he tried to keep himself together. The hunger. I can't stop it. No matter what I do, it's always there. God, I'm a monster. Everyone looked at Izuku strangely again. What hunger? The sickly man asked. Son, we can't help you unless you help us. Tell us what's wrong. How did you receive those quirks? Do you know anyone else like you? All these questions, the sickly man needed to know. The officer stayed quiet as he awaited for Izuku to say something. However, Izuku just sat there with his head still low. That is until he eventually looked up to face the man. With a very dark look. There's no else like me. I'm a monster. Izuku murmured darkly as closed his eyes. Whatever charges you have on me, I'll accept them. Just please, leave me alone. The sickly man didn't look like he was ready to leave. But before he could say anything, the officer stopped him, giving him a small shake of his head. The sickly man just sighed and nodded. The officer turned around to give the guard a nod, who gave a small salute. Both men were about to leave, but stopped when Izuku decided to speak once last time. I'm sorry. Tell everyone I'm sorry. Izuku softly whispered out. Especially my mom. Both men looked shocked by this, then resumed walking away. However, the sickly man gave Izuku a sympathetic glance before leaving. Soon Izuku was all alone again. The guard and cameras watching over him like a hawk. He could break out of here. Use any one of his quirks. But he decided to stay like this. He deserved it, at least until the hunger came back. It always comes back. A monster, that's all he was. Meanwhile, as Izuku wallowed in guilt and shame in his cell, the two men who had just gotten done talking to him were discussing recent events, namely about what happened and Izuku. So, All Might, what are you thinking about? The officer asked the sickly man, now known to be All Might. Do you think this kid has anything to do with, you know who? All Might just sighed. I don't know Tsukachi. That boy used multiple quirks just like him. So maybe? All Might murmured out with conflicted face. Tsukachi looked over at his friend worryingly. Still, what I saw that boy do. I'm still having trouble that someone involved with One for All would risk everything for innocent people. That boy saved those people without a second thought. He even worked willingly with the people he was fighting with. Tsukachi nodded. Why would Izuku risk his life for a couple of civilians? Why did he care? From all the stories and rumors about the Stalker, one would think Izuku would make an escape during the chaos. But he didn't. He stayed and revealed his identity to help and save people, even going so far to risk his life. Why though? What do you think he was talking about in there? About hunger? Tsukachi asked All Might. Do you think that's why he's after quirks? I've never heard of such quirk before. That's when All Might stopped, causing Tsukachi to stop as well. The detective looked over at his friend to see he had a rather serious expression on his face. I have only heard stories about it from my teacher in Gran Torino. Apparently a long time ago in the States, a man could take quirks, which resulted in a hunger for more. How he got these quirks wasn't pretty, I heard. He was considered to be the first quirk serial killer in history. Tsukachi looked shocked and a bit shaken by this. What was this guy's name? Tsukachi asked, still reeling from what he heard. All Might just stood there for a while, before he resumed walking. His name was Scylla. Meanwhile, at the Midoriya apartment, in a large apartment complex, in a small apartment, a short and plump woman with short green hair that was tied into a ponytail on her felt side looked very worried and jumpy. She was currently on the phone talking to her best friend, Mitsuki Bakugo, mother to Katsuki Bakugo, her son Izuku's former friend. The reason why she was talking to her that she was growing more worried that Izuku hadn't come home yet. Something he's been doing a lot as of late. She was hoping that he'd stop by at Mitsuki's. Unfortunately, he hadn't. Not in a long time. Thank you, Mitsuki. I'm sorry to bother you. No, I'm alright. If you do see Izuku, please tell him to call me. Alright, bye. Inko Midoriya sighed as she hung up the phone. Her worries for her son and where he was were only growing. Inko soon found herself walking towards the living room, where she took a seat on the couch. Where are you, Izuku? Why have you been acting so strange? Inko wasn't a fool. For the last few months she knew something was going on with her son. She was a mother after all. She knew Izuku was sneaking out at night, or not coming home from school after a long time for a reason. She just didn't know why. At first she thought it was because he's just a teenager, But that changed when he started coming home in bad shape. Usually he'd come home with cuts, scrapes, bruises, and even burns at one point. Inko thought it was because he was getting bullied. But that wasn't it. Her son was changing. He's been reading tons of books, magazines, and manuals. Some stuff that were too advanced for him. But he would finish those kind of books in a few hours. He'd also spend hours in his room, isolating himself, which only got her more worried. He's also been writing crazy stuff on a handmade manual he's made, detailing quirks, their strengths and weaknesses. She's even seen her quirk on there. All of this craziness began a few months ago, when Izuku came rushing home and locked himself in his room, like he did something terrible. Inko tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't come out. Not for hours. Until he did. When he came out, Izuku acted differently, more cautious and curious. Eventually things went back to normal. For a while. That is until Inko noticed that Izuku was acting strange again. Inko noticed that Izuku would watch her or loom over her strangely, like he was studying her or waiting for her to mess up or something. She began to fear him a little when she found him looming over her when she was sleeping. Eventually all that stopped. Right around that villain known as the Stalker showed up. Another reason she didn't want Izuku to be late at night. Inko heard the rumors and news reports about the Stalker. A mysterious villain/vigilante that would stalk people at night. Usually bad people. But Inko didn't want her or Izuku to ever encounter them. She also heard that he or she would leave their victims brain dead, a shell of their former selves. Inko didn't want that happening to her poor Izuku. I should probably watch some TV until he comes home, Inko stated with another sigh as she turned on the TV. She looked to see that it was a breaking news report. I wonder what's happening. Breaking news, an hour ago in the middle of a crowded street. An unexpected villain attack took place. That involved Mount Lady, Kamui Woods and another mysterious pro-hero. The villain that attacked was revealed to be the Stalker. A mysterious villain that many consider a vigilante who recently showed up these last few months, attacking and leaving his victims in a vegetative state. Many of whom were pretty criminals. Inko sat up straight as she listened to the report carefully. She began to have a very sinking and dark feeling down in her stomach. She hoped her son was alright. The fight was rough and resulted in Kamui Woods and the other pro-hero being hospitalized, leaving only Mount Lady to face the Stalker alone. During the altercation, Mount Lady unknowingly put innocent lives in danger. Thankfully no one was seriously hurt or lost their lives. Thanks to the Stalker, who stopped a collapsing building from falling on many innocents. However, he unknowingly placed his life in danger. But before anything happened, Japan's #1 hero All Might saved the day and apprehended the Stalker, resulting in his arrest. Inko gave out a small sigh of relief. She was glad no got hurt too badly, or worse got killed. She was also glad that no good Stalker was behind bars now. That's one worry off her chest. Unfortunately her son wasn't back yet. Before Inko knew it, the news report continued, so she brought her attention back on the TV. Reports are sketchy. But the Stalker was shown to have been using multiple quirks. Many reliable witnesses can confirm this. Unfortunately, we are unable to confirm this for ourselves. On the other hand, after being apprehended, we were able to confirm his identity. With cooperation from the police and pro-heroes, Inko just sat there waiting for them to continue, not knowing she was going to have the shock of her life. Before she knew it, they showed the Stalker in a mugshot, cuffed and chained, while having a guilt and shamed-looking expression. Inko sat there. Her face and eyes were widened, in shock and disbelief. She couldn't believe it. I Izuku, a little while ago at the Bakugo household. For the last time, I don't know where that shitty Deku is, Katsuki Bakugo yelled out with a vein appearing on his forehead. Katsuki was an average height for his age. He had ash blonde hair and had red eyes. He was currently outside the backyard of his home training, but couldn't because of his mom. Apparently because Deku's mom was calling, asking if they'd seen him. Fine, you shitty brat. And stop yelling! Katsuki heard his mom yelled out in the house. Katsuki just growled out as he fired off a small explosion from his palms. Boom! His quirk was called Explosion. It's an emitter quirk. It was a deadly and powerful quirk that matched a bit like his personality. Katsuki growled again as he kept on using his quirk. The sweat he was working was helping him out a lot. This how he burned off steam. And as of late he's been so pissed off. The reason? Deku! Katsuki snarled out with a pissed off expression. As of late Izuku, who called Deku, because he was a quirkless and shitty nerd, had been getting on his nerves lately. It happened a few months ago. On a day, he would remind Deku how worthless he was along with his friends. They would usually beat him up, and they did. But this time was different. It was almost he was enjoying it, seeing their quirks in action. It creeped them out that they stopped bullying him. Lately, that's all he's been doing, sneaking around trying to see how people's quirks worked. Writing everything in that little manual of his. "I'm gonna destroy that little fucking manual next time I see it," Katsuki yelled out as he kept firing explosions. That'll show that quirkless shithead. While Katsuki and Izuku used to be best friends when they were kids. That changed when he got his quirk, and Deku didn't. It showed him that he was powerful, and that Deku and everyone else were just pebbles in his way. Deku was a pebble. An annoying pebble. That's all he was. With one last furious yell, Katsuki was done. After recovering his breath, he decided to head inside and hit the sack. That shithead better be home with his mom. Good for nothing dumbass shouldn't worry her like that. While he didn't care about Izuku, Katsuki cared for his mom just like his own. She was kind and always smiling. Deku didn't deserve such a woman as a mother. Katsuki was just about to open the back door. His mom called out for him. "Katsuki! Get in here now!" Katsuki groaned out in anger as he came marching inside. Eventually he made to the living room where his mom and dad were, their faces in shock as they looked at the TV. Before Katsuki could say anything, his gaze was on the TV. And what he saw he couldn't believe. Reports are sketchy, but the Stalker was shown to have been using multiple quirks. Many reliable witnesses can confirm this. Unfortunately, we are unable to confirm this for ourselves. On the other hand, after being apprehended, we were able to confirm his identity. With cooperation from the police and pro-heroes, the TV showed the mugshot of Izuku in his Stalker gear, all chained and cuffed, while having a dejected and guilty expression. His name is Izuku Midoriya. He is 14 years old and is a junior high school student at Orodera Junior High School. He's reported to have been quirkless, but that appears to not be the case, since many witnesses and pro-heroes can confirm he has multiple quirks. We are unable to reach Mr. Midoriya for comment. However, we are working on getting one from his family and authorities who apprehended him. Stay tuned for more information. No one in the room could believe it. Katsuki more than anyone. His mom was the first one to snap out of it. She quickly headed to the phone and began to try and call Inko. Katsuki's dad just there on the couch. Still shock. The same for Katsuki, who still couldn't believe it. Izuku Midoriya, Deku, was the infamous and feared Stalker, the boogeyman to thugs and lowlifes everywhere. No fucking way! Meanwhile elsewhere, word was already spreading about Stalker, aka Izuku Midoriya. How he attacked pro-heroes and had them at his mercy. How he revealed his identity to the world to save a group of people from death. All because of a pro-hero's fault. How he has risked his own life. Many who knew Izuku could believe it, some refused to believe it. Word of the Stalker being a child reached many lowlifes and thugs everywhere, some of whom had lost friends or rivals because of him. Now that he was in police custody, they had nothing to fear anymore. Some were even thinking about getting payback, maybe by attacking that school of his or paying his family a visit. While that was happening, a mysterious large man sitting in a large medical chair, while being hooked to a number of machines and other things, couldn't help but chuckle at the news he was hearing on the TV. "Something wrong, master?" A well-mannered and serious voice asked in the shadows. "Does something about this bother you?" The man just chuckled again. "No, Kurojiri. It amuses me that someone could have a quirk so similar to Scylla's would be around. And to be someone so ordinary too. And in my backyard of all places. Do you want me to retrieve him?" Kurojiri asked, still lurking in the shadows. The man sighed as he was deep in thought. "No, let's see what happens to this dear boy. Right now he's little more than an animal. If he does prove himself, maybe we'll recruit him into our ranks. But for now we shall wait." "Yes, master, I understand," Kurojiri said before a loud whooshing was heard. And Kurojiri was gone, leaving the man to his thoughts. "I wonder, child, how will you end up? Will you be like Scylla and follow his path just as he began? Or will you follow the path he chose after that incident? Will you become an ally, or a rival just like him?" The man leaned forward on his chair a bit, revealing his face. The man's face seemed to be made entirely of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though outlines of eye sockets could be seen. "Whatever happens, I'll watch you closely. Izuku Midoriya, I wonder, child, how will you end up? Will you be like Scylla and follow his path just as he began? Or will you follow the path he chose after that incident? Will you become an ally? Or a rival just like him? The man leaned forward on his chair a bit, revealing his face. The man's face seemed to be made entirely of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though outlines of eye sockets could be seen. Whatever happens, I'll be watching you closely. Izuku Midoriya. With Izuku, the last hour had been quiet for Izuku. The guard and cameras were still watching him, but everything seemed alright. They still got chained up like some kind of animal. Sitting on this metal chair was getting uncomfortable, but he powered through. Everything seemed fine, but that quickly changed. The hunger, it came back. Izuku began to sweat and shake. He hated this. He wished he was quirkiness because this feels like a curse if anything. Maybe if he had his manual and could write on it, it would calm him down. Sadly, he left that back at home. I'm in control. I'm in control. I'm in control. Izuku murmured as he repeated himself over and over, greatly unsettling the guard. I'm in control, damn it! The guard have enough and tapped their baton aggressively on his cell bars. Keep it down! The guard ordered with a sneer. Freak. Immediately after that, Izuku froze. Like he completely shut down. A minute later, Izuku looked up and smiled darkly at the guard. No problem, officer. Izuku softly said in a slightly creepy tone and smile. The guard flinched. This kid was really freaking him out. He wished that next guy on shift would come already. He's heard the rumors about this kid and he doesn't want to end up like his victims. The guard eventually eased up a bit and leaned up against a wall. This was going to be a hell of a shift. While that was happening, the guard failed to notice that Izuku was doing something strange. He lowered his head to hide that his eyes had changed. They changed into the eyes of a rodent, a rat or mouses. Meanwhile, outside in a dark alley, 3 rats were eating garbage and scurrying about. That is until they suddenly stopped. Their eyes slightly changed color into a dark red. Then, like they were ordered, all 3 rats began to scurry along the police station. Eventually, they found what they were looking for. A broken and open vent. The rodents scurried in and were off to do what they were told, to find a safe exit and help release their master, whose hunger had returned. With All Might and others, Japan's one hero All Might was currently still in his sickly form. He was in a large office, which belonged to his friend Tsukachi. He was sitting in a chair deep in thought. He wasn't alone in the office. Tsukachi and few others were present with him. They were watching a small TV that was showing the news, and all they were talking about was the incident. This is rather troubling, Niza stated with a sigh. Niza was a pro-hero and principal at UA High School. He looked to be a small anthropomorphic dog/bear/mouse thing in an elegant suit. It looks like someone has leaked the information we have on Izuku Midoriya, which will cause some difficulties for us, I'm afraid, and for young Izuku's family. The people present couldn't help but agree. The people in the office, other than Tsukachi, were all pro-heroes. Eraserhead, Shota Aizawa, who had a couple of bandages on, courtesy from his fight with Izuku. His co-workers tried to convince him to stay in the hospital or take the night off. But of course he didn't listen or care. He wanted to stay close by in case something happened to Izuku. For some reason he was interested in our young stalker. For whatever reason, Namiri Kayama aka Midnight, the 18+ only hero. Hizashi Yamada aka Present Mike. Sekijiro Ken aka Vlad King, Blood Hero. Ken Ishiyama aka Cementas, and the Space Hero 13 were all there too. They were all gathered to discuss what they were going to do with Izuku, and deal with the aftermath of the incident. We may need to place Inko Midoriya under police protection. Maybe even pro-hero protection too, Cementas stated in a serious yet well-spoken tone. Because of her son's sudden reveal as the Stalker, many might want to attack or kill her for her son's actions. Most of his victims had family and allies who seemed to want such retaliation. We should bring her here just in case. Few of the heroes nodded, except one. So you just want to force this poor woman into more grief? Midnight asked in a harsh and serious manner. Her son is in jail and charged for being a vigilante and multiple charges. And you want to bring her in, just in case. The poor woman is probably losing her mind because she was told on the news of all places that her son is in jail for being a vigilante and having a whole list of victims under his belt. Cementas countered in a well-mannered tone. That still made Midnight growl in response. Her son is a menace that attacked and injured pro-heroes on duty. And for that he's in jail because of it. And because of him her life may be in danger. She's just going to have to accept that. Everyone in the room could tell this was going to get ugly. Midnight glared at the cementing hero with anger. You son of a dash. Thankfully, before things could escalate, 13 got in between the two, along with Vlad King. Look, we're not here to fight with one another. We're here to discuss our next move, 13 calmly stated, trying to defuse the situation. While I agree with what you're saying, Midnight, Cementas is right. Inko Midoriya might need protection just in case. Alright? Midnight and Cementas glared at each other for the longest time, until Midnight sighed and nodded. Good, so we'll contact Mrs. Midoriya to come down to the station. Just in case. After all, she might want to check on her son, 13 stated, getting more nods from his colleagues. Speaking of which, how is he? Tsukachi sighed as he grabbed the remote to the TV and changed the channel, which showed Izuku, chained up with his head lowered, unmoving. He's been like that for the last hour. He hasn't said much. The chief isn't back from Tokyo yet, so we haven't really got to question him. Chief wanted to take this one personally, Tsukachi explained to the heroes, even though that was a lie, since he and All Might questioned him a little over an hour ago. But they didn't need to know that. We thought about moving him to a more secluded and powerful cell, since we don't know the full extent of his quirks. We also have other prisoners too, if he does manage to break out. What's stopping him from taking their quirks? He's a complete wild card. Most of the heroes still couldn't believe it. How could a boy with such a mundane background and ordinary face be so powerful? And one of the most infamous vigilantes in Japan, who hasn't even been that active that long. Still hard to believe this punk could have so much power. I still can't believe he beat you, Aizawa. Sure, you had those two rookies with you, but how could you let that kid get the better of you? Vlad King asked as he pointed at the TV. Aizawa didn't say a word, he just scoffed and looked away, which made Vlad King grin. I'm sure I could have handled it. I doubt it. Everyone looked in surprise to see All Might with a serious face. I fought someone like that, with multiple quirks. Aizawa and those rookies are lucky to be alive. There's no telling what he would have done if he was like the one I fought, All Might explained in a dead serious tone. That made Vlad King's grin disappear. Everyone remained quiet as they listened to All Might, who looked at the TV. Why did he reveal his identity and risk his life to save people? The man I fought, he would have let those people die in an instant. Why didn't he do it? Everyone was stunned and remained silent, asking the same question as well. Why? Does it matter? He's a vigilante, who's left countless victims in his path, all of whom are brain dead, even though they weren't model citizens. Izuku Midoriya is a criminal. Simple as that, Vlad King coldly stated, only getting a few nods. He's also an unregistered quirk user. Even if he doesn't mean it, he can't control his quirk or quirks. He is a danger to himself and those around him. He also attacked 3 pro heroes and endangered those people he saved. It doesn't matter what good he's done, he's dangerous and needs to be locked away. While most wouldn't put that way, Vlad King was right. Izuku Midoriya wasn't like most kids. He was different. He was dangerous. You are wrong, my dear friend. Everyone looked to see Niza smiling as he watched TV. If we started locking people away because they can't control their quirks or understand them, then we would be no better than the evil we fight against every day, Niza stated, still smiling. He then turned to All Might. You see it too, don't you, my friend? While he has made mistakes, I believe Izuku Midoriya has untapped potential. All he needs is a guiding hand, or hands. That's when he looked over to all his colleagues, who suddenly realized what he was insinuating. Oh, come on, you can't be serious. That's a crazy idea, even for you, Niza. All Might just sat there stunned. Did Niza see something in Midoriya that he also saw? It's true that he did feel sympathetic towards Izuku, but what he did was wrong. While he didn't have a choice, what he did to feed his hunger and gain those quirks was wrong. At least he had yet to take in a life. In a strange way, All Might felt something towards young Midoriya, like he saw a bit of himself in the troubled boy. Could it be that he was the one he was searching for? A successor? The way he saw him risk everything to save those people, that woman and her child, even if meant he would die. He didn't even hesitate. It frightened All Might to see so much of all for one in Izuku. Not just by quirk or quirks alone, but the way he acted when he fought Aizawa, Kamui Woods and Mount Lady. That hunger and anger in his eyes. It was like seeing a younger All for One. Still though, when Izuku rushed in to save those people, it was like seeing a ghost. Especially when he saw him smile afterwards, when he was so close to getting crushed. It reminded him of what his sensei once told him. When you have to save someone, they're usually in a scary situation. A true hero saves not only their lives, but also their spirits. That's what I believe. So no matter how scary things get, give him a smile, as if to say, I'm okay. The people in this world who can smile are always the strongest. All Might remembered Izuku's smile, and compared it to his sensei's smile. It was like looking at a ghost. If there was a chance for him a long time ago, a child with no quirk to become a hero, then maybe there was a chance for Izuku. Even though he's caused pain and trouble as the Stalker. Everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe Izuku deserved one too. All Might sat there for the longest time, deep in thought. Finally it looked like he was about to speak. But before he could, something unexpected happened. The lights and TV suddenly went out. FOM. Everyone looked around to see everything was off, even the lights outside the office. Many people outside gasped or asked what was going on. Suddenly a dim light came on everywhere, which was the emergency power. That only powered the lights and cells. What's going dash? Before Midnight could finish that sentence, a loud and thunderous explosion was heard. That shook the building a little. Boom! Everyone almost lost their balance but quickly recovered. All Might looked over to Tsukachi, who had a worried expression on his face. He then looked to the rest of the heroes, who all knew what happened and who's the cause. And why. Locked down the building a little while ago with Izuku. For the guard watching over Izuku, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. After all, he was guarding the most wanted guy in Japan. He's heard some scary stuff about this kid. How he left people brain dead, while the kid didn't look it. He was dangerous. At least that's what the lieutenant told him. As the guard continued to worry or complain to himself, Izuku just sat there, his head lowered. So the guard and cameras wouldn't be able to see him using his quirk. One of them anyways. This quirk was called Pied Piper. With it, Izuku is able to control rodents. He got this off some crazy info broker who found out his identity. And he couldn't have that. That crazy guy tried to blackmail him into killing one of his rivals. But Izuku decided to put an end to it then and there. So, that's how he got this quirk, which he was using now to break out of here. He needed to get out here and find a quick meal. Then he can head home to his mom and explain everything. After that, well, he hadn't thought that much ahead yet. First he needed to break out of here and find someone's quirk to take. He didn't know who, but he'll get there eventually. His eyes were still like a rat's, because he was controlling and through one of his rat's perspective. He'd sent two out to find him a quick and safe exit out of this building, and he found it. But first he needed to cut the power, which will make getting out of here a lot easy. After a good minute, Izuku smiled. He found it. The place that powered this whole building. All he needed to do is tell the rat to chew through what looks important and hope for the best. He could use his main quirk to figure what to do, but he could only understand stuff if he was looking at it with his own two eyes. It was nice to have a weakness with all the power he has. It made him feel human. Izuku then thought of a way out of here, giving his rat one last command. Izuku turned his quirk off and began to use another, a recent quirk he got a few weeks ago. While not the most powerful or useful at times, Izuku had a plan. With a smile, he began to gather sawdust into his hands. This quirk was called Sawdust. With it, he is able to generate sawdust. While on a smaller scale, he could generate more if there was woods or other stuff nearby. But this would have to do for now. As time went by, Izuku had summoned enough sawdust. Now it was time to put his plan in action. His hands were filled with sawdust. All he had to do was ignite it somehow and try not to get himself injured or worse. After some thinking, Izuku figured something out. Arg! The guard instantly looked at Izuku and saw him trying to break out of his cuffs and chains while using his stone mimicry. It was easy enough to break the cuffs off, but the chains were a bit more durable. Meanwhile, the guard began to panic. People in the other cells on the rows stopped what they were doing to see what was going on. The hell going on? Someone trying to escape! Better run, pig! The guard completely ignored the others and focused on Izuku, who had just gotten done breaking out of his chains. Afterwards, Izuku began to walk towards the cell bars and to the guard, who quickly raised his gun at Izuku in fear, who just smiled. Been a while since I've seen one of those pointed at me. Should tell you it didn't work so well for the last guy, Izuku stated as he continued to walk towards the bars. Please, just let me out and no one gets hurt. At least I hope. Get on the ground now, the guard yelled out with his gun still raised. I'm giving you 3 seconds. Down now! Izuku just sighed as he shook his head. This was going to be difficult. 3. Are you for real? Just open dash. 2. Seriously? You have a gun. I'm currently made out of stone. How do you think this is going to turn dash? 1. Izuku groaned in annoyance. Suddenly all the lights and everything else turned off. FOM. The guard instantly panicked. He looked around in fear. Suddenly a dim lit red light came on, lighting the entire cell hallway, which meant that emergency power was on, and that the cells were still locked and shut. However, before he could sigh in relief, Izuku was at the cell bars staring at the guard with a smile, which caused the guard to raise his gun and fire in fear. Something Izuku hoped for. Before the guard could fire, Izuku threw all the sawdust he made at the guard and cell bars. He immediately ducked and shielded himself. Boom! Izuku softly stated. Bang! The guard fired his weapon. Unfortunately for him, the sawdust had reached him. The smallest bit of flame from the gunfire immediately ignited the sawdust and caused an explosion. Boom! The resulting explosion caused the guard to be sent flying, making him the wall, the resulting force causing him to cry out in pain. The explosion heavily damaged the cell and made the building shake a bit. Eventually, as the dust and building settled, Izuku got up and looked at the cell bars. They looked weak and damaged enough to break through now. With mighty yell, he grabbed the bars and pulled with all his might. The bars quickly broke off along with most of the cell door. Izuku then roughly threw them on the ground. Izuku then walked out of the cell. He looked down at the ground, looking at the hurt guard. He sighed and frowned. You should have let me go, Izuku stated rather darkly. His hunger was in now full control. He didn't know who this guy's quirk was, but he didn't care. He needed to feed. Now, forgive me. Izuku slowly started to reach down to grab the guard and take his quirk, but he suddenly stopped. His other hand grabbed the other one and squeezed so hard that his stone skin began to crack up. I'm in control. Izuku tried his best to stop himself, but he couldn't. All seemed lost until he heard a voice and footsteps coming from behind him. Back away from that guard, kid. He's our ticket out of here. Izuku turned around and saw 3 men. One was a fairly tall man with dirty hair who was wearing steel refinery clothes, most likely his work clothes. He looked rather serious and had his quirk activated, which was making his hands look to be covered in hot molten magma. The other man looked too small and looked like a thug Izuku would hunt for. His clothes were baggy and he had long dark hair. His quirk was also active. His right arm looked to be covered in metal. His hand looked to be replaced by a long and sharp blade. The last guy looked like the last guy, a thug, except he looked more serious and afraid when he saw Izuku. His eyes were a strange glowing green hue, most likely his quirk. Look, I don't care who you are or what you did, but we're going to use that guard as a hostage so we can walk out of this dump, the molten magma guy stated, causing the metal arm guy to smirk while the eye guy just whimpered. You in, kid? Or you gonna get in the way? Izuku just stood there, like he was in deep thought. Then with a dark smile and hungry look, he clenched his hand, causing him to stop using his stone mimicry quirk. Suddenly a bit of black haze started to slowly seep out of his mouth. I think I have a better idea. Izuku quickly blew out all the haze he could. Soon the hallway was completely covered in black haze. Screams were then heard quickly after that. A little while later, outside the cell hallway, many policemen and women were awaiting outside a large hallway, all of them in riot gear with shields and batons. All of them ready to storm the door they all waited next to. The door to the cells where they kept Izuku and 3 other perpetrators and offenders who broke the law. This was the only way in or out. They had them trapped. What's the situation? Tsukachi asked as he came walking into a hallway with All Might, who was in his hero form. He was also with a few of the heroes. Eraserhead, Vlad King and 13. The rest of heroes were nearby but were checking to see if anyone was hurt by that explosion, since they didn't know where or how big it was. Has anyone tired to break out? A police officer in riot gear who looked to be a cat shook his head. No sir, we heard a bit of screaming but that's all. We would have stormed in right away but we thought we should wait for you and the heroes, Sansa Tamakawa said, giving a small salute. Tsukachi gave a nod, telling him to be at ease. The feline officer nodded. He then pointed to the metal door that led to the cell hallway. We also couldn't do a thing because of this strange black mist, sir. We are waiting for someone to bring some gas mask from the armory. Tsukachi and the heroes looked at the heavy metal door. It had a small window, but all it showed on the other side was a black haze. The haze looked to be also seeping from under the door and cracks, but was seeping enough to be a danger. Sakachi sighed as he nodded. Looks like they were going to have to wait for those gas masks before they could do anything. But All Might suddenly came up with an idea. 13, think you can get rid of that mist? Everyone looked to the space hero, who nodded. Just leave it to me, everyone. 13 walked up to the door and bent down a little. He placed his finger under the door, which was big enough, then activated his quirk black hole. He releases a small vortex from any one of his fingers to suck anything and turn it into dust. Soon he began to suck up all the haze. Eventually the hallway filled with the mist was completely cleared, making it safe to enter. There you all go, 13 stated in a rather happy tone. Sakachi smiled and nodded. His expression quickly turned serious. They had a man in there with 4 dangerous criminals. Alright, Riot Squad, get ready to storm the hallway on my command. Heroes, stay close if something happens. Everyone around Sakachi nodded and got ready. The Riot Squad awaited his command while All Might and the heroes got ready if anything went wrong. Sakachi pulled out his gun, just in case. Alright. Now! The Riot Squad immediately opened the door and rushed in. They were soon followed by Sakachi and the heroes, and what they found was shocking and a bit horrifying. Oh my god! The whole hallway looked like a battlefield. Slashes, burning parts, melting parts, and small craters everywhere. And that wasn't the half of it. The guard that was on shift was unconscious while leaning against the wall. He looked beat up, but not as worse as the other prisoners. All 3 of them were laid out in various places. One was laying next to the guard, while one was very injured in an empty cell. That belonged to Midoriya. The last one looked to be thrown against a wall so hard, he was stuck in place. Men, check on our man and those prisoners. Be careful, I don't see Midoriya among them. Sakachi sternly ordered, getting nods from the officers. 2 went to check on the guard while the rest went to check on the prisoners. A minute went by and Sakachi grew worried. Status, sir, the guard has some injuries and burn marks but not too serious, one of the officers said as he checked on the guard one more time. He's just unconscious, but we should probably get him checked out. Sakachi nodded as began to look towards the rest of his men. Status, one of the officers checked in with the rest of his colleagues. Then he walked over to Sakachi with a sorrow-filled expression. The prisoners are alive but have suffered major injuries. Unfortunately, they appear to be unresponsive and in a vegetative state, just like the rest of the Stalker's victims. Sakachi, All Might, and the rest of the heroes were shocked. Sakachi was the first to recover and asked the most important question. Where is Midoriya? Before the officer could reply, another officer called out to them at the end of the hallway, where the last cell was. Sir, over here! Sakachi and the heroes quickly made their way to the officer, and were stunned by what they saw. You got to be kidding me, Vlad King stated. All of them were staring at a large melted hole that led to the back alleyway of the building, big enough for someone to escape through. How did he manage that? 13 asked. Sakachi sighed as he frowned. The other prisoners, he has their quirks now. Everyone still couldn't believe it. Izuku Midoriya, the infamous Stalker, had escaped and had even more quirks under his command now. All Might frowned sadly as he looked at the hole. His thoughts went to Izuku. Where have you gone, young Midoriya? A while later with Izuku. In a dark alley, Izuku Midoriya was limping along the alleyway's wall. He was holding his right side with his left hand, and he was clenching his teeth in pain. He was hurt. That magma guy got him pretty good. Izuku didn't activate his stone mimicry fast enough, so now he had a really nasty burn mark. He removed his hand and wished he hadn't. He could see and even smell burnt flesh, while injuries and wounds were no stranger to him. Not since he became the Stalker. This made him want to puke or cry out in pain, and that wasn't all he had either. He had a few cuts and major slash on his back. Thankfully, he was able to become stone before that happened, so all that guy slashed was his coat. The rest of his injuries, unfortunately, were real. He needed to get to a hospital or find help, but he couldn't, for obvious reasons. Makes me wish I had a healing or regenerative quirk, Izuku moaned out with a forced smile. Almost there, just got to make it. After a good minute, Izuku finally made to the other side of the alleyway. He then found himself in a lone street. It took him a while to get here, from dodging cops and heroes, but he was almost there. Home. Izuku looked up to see his apartment complex a block away. He could use enhanced jumping to get there quicker, but he was too injured and didn't want to draw attention. With a sigh, Izuku began to walk home. He knew it was a bad idea since that would be the first place the police and heroes would check, but he needed to see his mom now that his mind was clear, to explain and apologize for everything. As Izuku continued make his way home, Something shocking happened. DKU! Izuku froze in place. He dared not move or even breath for the longest time. With a deep sigh and sad frown, he turned around to where the voice came from. There, a couple of feet from him, stood his former best friend and now main bully standing there. His face and eyes filled with rage. Ka-chan! Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.